let's get going with the Arch Manning stuff. Last week, Arch Manning, obviously nephew of Peyton and Eli Manning, committed to the Longhorns. Since then, Texas has added 9 commitments, including Jonte Cook, wide receiver from DeSoto, another 5-star today. When I wrote the Big 12 recruiting story about 2 weeks ago, Texas was in the mid-20s. I think they were like 27th in the nation recruiting. The last time I looked, they were second. So, Powers, in your opinion, kind of what is Texas getting with Arch Manning, and how much does that help kind of their recruiting momentum to get kind of like that flagship guy in this class?
Well, I'm going to answer your second question first here, because since Arch Manning has committed to Texas, they've picked up 9 commitments, and it's been under a week. I think it's been just 6 days since he's made his commitment. So more than one commitment every day. Kind of cherry on top of that commitment parade was this afternoon when DCTF's #1 rated wide receiver, Jonte Cook, pulled the trigger on his commitment to Texas, giving Arch Manning, a key piece, I think, in the passing game. And we've all seen what Steve Sarkisian can do with a good wide receiver crop. As a matter of fact, we've seen what he can do with wide receivers who aren't that highly rated as well. So he's a guy who knows how to get the receiver open and get him the football, which I think is integral in their success as they move forward. Arch is rated as the #1 player in the country, the #1 rated quarterback in the country, and I've been doing scouting reports and for over 20 years. 15 of those 20 years I was responsible for rating players, across the country, looking at players from other states, covering all of the big events, the opening Under Armour All-America game, U.S. Army All-American Bowl, now just the All-American Bowl. So I've seen a lot of top talent in my heyday scouting top recruits, right? So Arch is a guy who I think has the pedigree. You have to understand how to be a great college player to be any good at all, right? Check that first box, right? He's going to have the people in his corner to help coach him up, and he knows probably what it takes to be a good quarterback. Secondly, I feel like he's done a pretty good job of handling the fame of being the #1 rated recruit. He's not a guy who's out there clamoring for attention, or really, I would say in some ways that he shies away from some of it, but I don't see it as a negative thing. Like you have to worry about, is he assertive enough to be the leader? He's a leader. I don't think that there's anything that you have to worry about, like, is he too meek or meager? And
a lot of those kids, when they're young and in high school and going through this recruiting process, they almost need that attention to build up their profile, right? To get their brand going. Now in the NIL world, as we saw with Arch's commitment tweet, he doesn't need to do any of that. He's already a Manning. I think it was the most liked commitment tweet of all time or something, according to some people. So he doesn't need to kind of go out and get that attention. He already has the last name. I agree with you. Like, the fact that Peyton and Eli have been there, done that, can only help him. Like any question he has, any bit of adversity he goes against, he can just call one of the best quarterbacks of all time in Peyton Manning, a 2-time Super Bowl champion in Eli Manning. And so a lot of good in his corner. I don't know if I'm convinced that Arch Manning is Vince Young or Quinn Ewers. And those are the only 2 guys that have ever been rated as high as he is. Right. But I do think the benefit of having a Manning committed to your program is almost immeasurable, right? Because Steve Sarkisian, coming off of 5-7 season, can go to every recruit now and go, the Manning family trusts me with their next jewel, right? Like, Arch is up next in this family that's seen everything and knows basically every person in college football, and they chose me, Steve Sarkisian. I think that's more valuable than him as a quarterback. And then the next note is, I've seen a lot of people with the Quinn Ewers thing, like, oh, is Quinn gonna transfer? How is that gonna work? I think it's set up perfectly, right? Like, Quinn Ewers gets to be the quarterback for the next 2 years. Arch Manning comes in 2023, washes for a year, and then he gets to be the quarterback for 2 years. If you're Steve Sarkisian, I don't know how this offseason could go any better.
Yeah.
I agree. And, the different recruiting services rate players for different reasons, highly, right? At 24/7 Sports, we rated players there based upon their NFL potential. Your #1 player in the country, you felt like he could be the #1 pick in the NFL draft. Here at DCTF, I have more of a focus on, I think, college production over. You always want to rate to some sort of NFL hype, right?
Sure.
But I look at a guy as what could his college potential be?
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Can he lead a team to a national championship? Can he be a All-American? Is he going to be All-Conference? Those are the things I look for when I kind of pick and choose the top 50, which are the 4-star guys. And then when the top 5 comes, you factor in a little bit more. Are they a national name? Like Garrett Wilson, number 1 rated player in the state, because I thought he could go off to college and be in the Heisman race, right? That's what I was thinking there. And you can rate some guys on upside. I think Arch Manning, 6'4", 215 pounds, showcases a plus arm, over 65% accuracy on a 3-year high school career. He's going to be a 4-year starter. There are a lot of boxes to check there. I'm a bit of a Texas high school football snob.
Yeah.
Admittedly now.
Right.
You know, we're blessed here to see great players in great programs playing for great coaching staffs. Mm-hmm. And that is what concerns me a little bit as I look at Arch, if anything, is what type of competition does he play week in and week out, and does that translate exactly as what we would think is like a top-rated Texas high school football talent? But you know what? Louisiana produces a lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
They do. You're right.
Of great stars, not only for college football, but there are a lot of great players playing in the NFL. So that's just like a very small critique if you want to critique getting the number 1 player in the country, right?
Right. Yeah, I do think it's an important point, right? He doesn't play 6A Texas football. You know, like we saw Quinn Ewers play against Westlake's defense. Like we saw Vince Young make a really long run in the high school playoffs. Like we've never seen Arch not be the best player on the field. Like he's far and away the best player on every field he gets to. But if Ewers is what everybody thinks that Ewers is, he's going to have a year to kind of figure that out and catch up, and he won't have to just be like the savior right away. And I think that's important for Sark. Before we let you go, what do you think Texas is getting in Jonte Cook? I know you're really high on him.
Yeah.
I've kind of been out of the recruiting game for a little while now, so I don't follow it as closely. Like he's a 5-star guy out of DeSoto. What does he bring to the Longhorns?
I compared him. My comparison for him, and I just made it, we did like a recruiting recap of the Texas 7-on-7. I didn't know that Jonte Cook was going to pull the trigger on his commitment today to Texas. But the guy who I compare him to is Hollywood Brown. I think that's a pretty solid comparison. I think Jonte is a guy who probably fits most naturally in as a slot wide receiver at the next level. 6 foot, 5'11", 6 foot, 170-ish pounds. Very quick off the line, very fluid, great feet. Catches the ball very naturally. I think that he is a guy who operates better in space, but I think he can go outside and provide some burst up the sideline or make some plays deep down the field. Now, I think Hollywood is like a true outside receiver. He's not your typical outside receiver. So I think Jonte Cook fits in that mold as a guy who might fit in best as a slot wide receiver in college, but can flip out and do some things on the outside as well to add some versatility to the offense. He's the number 1 rated wide receiver in the DCTF rankings this year, which kind of tells you a lot because we produce a lot of really good wide receivers. This is a huge pickup. I think that he's the type of guy who will be ringleader for the class. I think that he'll work the phones, he'll work social media, try to get other guys to join the club. He wants to win a national championship, and I find it interesting that I spoke with him following the state 7-on-7, and he's into Arch Manning going to be on the team. He's into Quinn Ewers being on the team, but he realizes that for him, a good quarterback is like a bonus to what he was looking for. I think he had a great quote when he says Steve Sarkisian can get a 5-0 flat wide receiver open in his offense. Right. And I think that's the reason why he picked Texas. And Arch Manning, Quinn Ewers, they're just like a cherry on top of kind of everything that culminated in his recruitment.
I feel like this week has validated Texas's hiring of Steve Sarkisian. Right? Like this was the plan. I know 5-7 wasn't the plan. Losing second half leads wasn't the plan. But the idea of bringing in this offensive guru that everybody respects, from old guys like Peyton Manning to young guys like Jonte Cook, recognize that Steve Sarkisian is this offensive genius. Coming off of a 5-7 season to be able to do this is impressive.
It's wild.
Imagine if they win 10 games. Like what that momentum can be like at Texas.
I love what you said.
A&M's class.
He's bought it. He bought more years. You know, he's bought extra time there because you're not going to – you're definitely going to not put a lot of pressure on the job there till you can see what Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning do.
Because I thought this year was going to be interesting for Steve Sarkisian, right? Like, he went 5-7 year one. We know Texas fans don't have a lot of patience. Let's say they get beat by 40 by Alabama and go 7-5 this year. Well, that hot seat ratchets it up. But now with Arch and this recruiting class coming on, I think Tepper mentioned it's kind of like A&M, where Jimbo Fisher went 8-4 last year. It was a bad year. That was with a win over Alabama. But nobody's talking about Jimbo Fisher being on the hot seat.
No.
Because look at all the momentum he has in recruiting. Tom Herman was fired in some part because of his personality, but a large part because he couldn't get Quinn Ewers. He couldn't get the Brockermeyer twins. Garrett Wilson goes to Ohio State. He got fired after 7-3. I would say Texas fans are more excited right now after a 5-7 season because at least they can see that the head coach is bringing in that talent.
Well, just in college football in general, you're going to see more guys get whacked after 2 years.
Yeah.
This is coming, folks. Like, there is no comfortability now as a college football head coach. The NIL, transfer portal, all that stuff has changed college football in such a way that you have to win now.
Right.
And if you're at a program that has money and can afford to, for lack of a better term, buy players,
Right.
you can't afford to sit back and rack up L's, you know, unless there's like a pathway to success or some, things like Arch Manning in your future.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's a win now game, and a 5-7 year again this year, I think would have forecasted doom there. But even with a 5-7 year now, I don't think that you can talk, hey, Coach Sark is in trouble at Texas. And I don't know what
unless Arch decommits.
I'm not a college football expert. I love to watch college football, don't get me wrong, but I don't know, like, is their schedule played out favorably where that's not an option? Are they going to go 5-7? That's where I defer to you. How does that schedule kind of shape up this season?
I mean, it's a tough schedule with Alabama being at home and just not knowing what Texas is. I think their problems are defensively, and that's where they're going to have to figure this stuff out. Like, I believe Sark's going to always have an offense, kind of like what Cook said. He can make a 5.0 wide receiver open, right? So they're going to score points. It's going to be about defense, and to me, Texas's landing point is 2024. That's where we're all hearing that the SEC entrance is going to happen. That roster needs to be ready by 2024. Having Arch on deck kind of shows that momentum going that way. And Sark, no matter what the record is this year, he can kind of point to the future and go, look, I'm still dealing with guys that I inherited. Look at the guys I'm bringing, even with these records. Once we get this rolling and we're in the SEC, we're going to be all the way up. Because as much as we've kind of given Sark the props for getting Arch isn't coming if Texas isn't going to the SEC.
Right.
The fact that Texas is going to the SEC, coupled with Sarkisian's offensive acumen, I think makes them a destination spot. We'll see if defensively can catch up with the offensive recruiting.
I think Texas is recruiting strongly to the SEC. Looking at the offensive line recruits that they just brought in, they picked up 4 O-line commits in that group of 9 that we kind of talked about off the top. Andre Kojo, 6'6", 345 or 330 pounds. Connor Stroh, 6'7", 345, 350 pounds.
They're getting big.
You know what I mean? Like, they're going for the hog mollies up front that can, lay the groundwork to open up holes when they move to the SEC. These are the type of guys they are recruiting, and I like what they've done in recruiting. Last year's class was really good. They've sandwiched that into what could be in the race to be the number 1 overall class in the country this year. They have talent at Texas. It's going to be on the roster, especially by the year 2023.
Yep. They just need that defensive line. If they need a defensive line class, kind of like how A&M had last year, where there's just like multiple impact guys in that. It's going to be fun, right? If like Texas follows Texas A&M's class, like if they go back to back number 1 classes, like it's a good sign for college football in the state of Texas, and it's exciting to see.
It's funny. It is funny to see how they do it different, though.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean? Like you hit the nail right on the head. Texas A&M went heavy on the defensive front, had a lot of success there, whereas I feel Texas has really done a great job, quarterbacks, wide receiver, running back.
Yep.
And that'll be interesting to see how that plays out too.
All righty, sir. We appreciate it. We will now talk about KD Davis coming back to North Texas, a big college news there. Like KD Davis, for those who don't know, leading tackler at North Texas. In the magazine, go subscribe and get one of
Good
these.
promo.
One of these beautiful things. In the magazine, we have KD Davis listed as the best linebacker.
Yep.
He's a first-team All-State guy, and he was the player profile for North Texas section. So I thank KD Davis personally for saving some of the college football magazine information stuff. But a big deal for North Texas. For those who don't know, he entered the transfer portal about a week and a half ago. Went on a visit to A&M, was also getting a lot of interest from Ole Miss, decided to come back to North Texas. It's a big boost for Phil Bennett in that defense. He's only 97 tackles away from being the all-time leading tackler in North Texas history. So after losing the Murphy twins on defensive line to UCLA in the transfer portal, they could not lose Katie Davis. I think this was a sigh of relief, right?
I was going to say, if you're a North Texas fan, you can kind of breathe a little bit better now knowing that your defense is probably going to still be okay, even though they lost the Murphy twins. Yeah. But I think that North Texas was kind of in panic mode, to say the least, because, I mean, if you're losing 3 of your stars on defense, you're kind of hitting panic mode at that point, you know.
Well, and it says something about the program, right? If all your best players are jumping out into this transfer portal and leaving, especially late into the summer, you know, that speaks volumes, right? So for Latrell, Phil Bennett to get him back on campus is big.
Huge
I
win.
find this interesting, right? Like, I think we're going to see this more and more, where guys go test the waters, like to go see what's out there, whether it be money, whether it be playing time, whether it be a bigger platform. And this is just my uninformed opinion. But I believe that Katie Davis kind of went to Ole Miss, went to Texas A&M, and realized, okay, I'm going to be a guy on this defense. If I'm at North Texas, I am the guy. And if I have a senior season in the same way I had a junior season, I'm going to leave North Texas as one of the top 5 players ever in this program. I'm going to be in the Hall of Honor. I'm going to be a legend.
Right.
And so he came back, and which brings up, I think, an interesting question. You know, if you're going through recruiting, if you're one of these guys, do you want to be kind of like top dog at a place like North Texas, or, you know, a guy at a place like A&M?
I can tell you 100% in confidence that I would much rather be the guy at a program like North Texas than just the second string linebacker that may get in at A&M when they play Louisiana or something, you know, when they're blowing them out. Just because, I think we talked about this earlier. North Texas, you're going to get into the Hall of Fame. Katie Davis is probably going to get into the North Texas Hall of Fame. His name is going to be somewhere in that stadium. You know, you can't really say that confidently if he transfers to A&M and he's just the backup, right? So why not just be the guy at North Texas, and then your legacy kind of just lives on there? You know, like Mean Joe Green.
Yep.
People are still talking about him. That was years ago. So
yeah, I agree with you. I would kind of be the same way. I mean, it's one of the reasons I took this job, right? You know, like I've always kind of liked being like, you know, like the guy on my own, kind of doing it, you know, doing the thing. Like, you know, at the Statesman, I was like the recruiting writer. Here, I get to be the college writer, and everybody else is kind of dealing with high school stuff. So I definitely enjoy that platform. And maybe if I was a freshman or sophomore, I'd take that chance to go to A&M or Ole Miss, and I have a couple years to work into the starting lineup and play major football, and then maybe, you know, get more looks into the NFL draft. I think nowadays you can get seen anywhere. So, like, if you have an awesome year and you ball out at North Texas, that's not going to stop you from getting drafted. But also, he only has 1 year left. So if you show up to A&M in August, it's going to be really hard to work yourself into, like, the starting lineup, right? Where at North Texas, you're the dude. Like, you are the dude. So good on North Texas as a you know, place that covers all 12 FBS programs. Like, we root for them all to be really good. This helps North Texas a lot. I would have been concerned with kind of the momentum and feeling within that program if a guy like Katie Davis leaves at the end of June.
I think so too.
It's just not a good sign.
Right.